McCoy, and this is the panel on ensuring effective police accountability. I'm going to call our chair, Kevin Jones, to come up and introduce the moderators. And so if you could all just sit tight and we'll get started.
Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I want to say thank you for taking the time to be a part of our amazing CLE, joining the criminal law juvenile justice section. My name again is Kevin Jones, and I have the distinct honor and pleasure of serving this beautiful body of jurists in the form of the criminal law juvenile justice section chair. But I'll be remiss if I didn't acknowledge many more. First of all, I just want everybody to give a round of applause to Robyn McCoy for putting this CLE together. And all the great work. Also joined on the panel is our vice chair of this section. We have Herbert Adams, and he'll introduce himself further later. But I just want to say thank you for those who are not members of this section. We do a lot of work and a lot of work to be done, and we need you. So please, if you're not a member, if you have not paid, it's only $25. And if you'd like to pay more, that'd be great too, because we need your time, your talent, and yes, we need your money. So please sign up for the criminal law juvenile justice section and be a part of this, because it's a lot of work to be done. Without further ado, you're going to hear from this amazing panel of people. It's all brothers up here. That's unusual. But we're grateful to have them, because it's really important to hear the voice of everybody, but especially in the form of criminal law, because we know the person who's most under watch and surveillance are typically black men. That's not saying that black women are not either another poor entities, but I just want to make that acknowledgement. But without further ado, I want to introduce our amazing moderators and dedicated personnel in the legal field that's on the front line fighting every day for reform and to make sure that we have oversight so we can have a more beneficial outcome in our criminal justice system. And as I introduced already, none other than Robyn McCoy, and she is the past president, you can see up there, of the Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan, and she is currently the vice chair of the International Law section. So put your hands together for our co-moderator, Robyn McCoy.
Thank you.
And of course, we have none other than Attorney Coleman, Delicia Taylor Coleman. I've had the pleasure of being on a panel with her when we were in Minneapolis. Yes, and an amazing.
Yeah.
Was it Houston?
Wasn't it Houston?
I don't know. We do so many things.
It was the mid-year. Yeah.
It was in one city. The president, our president of the Black Women Lawyers Association, again of Michigan. You're in for a treat. I want to apologize in advance. We have many more members of the section. But unfortunately, they double booked us because we have so many great CLEs. We had 2 this morning at the same time. We have 2 going on now at the same time. But I don't want to take up any more time. Without further ado, I give you in the hands of our moderators, Attorney Robyn McCoy, as well as Attorney Coleman. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair Jones. Can everybody, I don't know if this is on. Can everybody hear me? Hello? Yeah. Okay, I'll just use this mic. So yes, my name is Attorney Robyn McCoy. I've been practicing, it'll be 23 years in November, and I am a criminal defense attorney. I've also represented juveniles in the juvenile justice system. And it was almost like a calling I felt in 2014 to start doing programming on what to do when stopped by the police. So I do programming on what to do when stopped by the police. I also do expungement workshops. That's workshops on educating people about how to clear their records. And then pathways to the law, as well as how to navigate our public school system. I do see Walter, who is our secretary for the criminal law section, so Walter, and I see Congressman Bobby Scott. So welcome all of you. Congressman Scott is a social justice warrior. So we want to make sure that everybody, make sure to get your CLE credit, that they check your QR code. We also have a sign-in sheet just in case there's a glitch, so make sure the sign-in sheet should be at the back of the room. And so as I've been doing programs on what to do when stopped by the police, The children have been saying to me, okay, Attorney McCoy, because I've talked to middle school, high school, college, you know, I just, when I was seeing what was happening with Michael Brown, Tamir Rice, it just, the whole list. I mean, we have in Detroit, we had Patrick Leola. We've had so many situations, even recent incidents of police brutality, brutalization of Black men, women, and children. So when I was hearing about it, I just said I wanted to start doing this programming, and so that I prayed on it. I was upset about what's happening to, a lot of it is Black males, you know. I mean, I gear it towards Black men, women, and children, but it's Black males because Black males are perceived as the highest threat. And so I think it's essential that we talk about these issues. I know we have the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that, you know, has not, you know, made it past. It's not been signed into law, but we're hopeful that we do get that signed into law at some point. I think it's essential to have it on a local, state, and national level. So at this time, I'm going to start introducing our panelists. I'm going to introduce some, and then we're going to have Delicia tag team and introduce. I'll introduce the first three, and she'll introduce the rest, the other three. So to my right is the inaugural San Francisco Inspector General responsible, Terry Wiley. If you could raise your hand, Terry. Attorney Terry Wiley. He also has been very helpful with putting this panel together. So what he does is he's responsible for oversight of the San Francisco Sheriff's Office. He's a recognized expert and strong advocate for criminal justice reform and fighting inequalities in the adult and juvenile justice system. Mr. Wiley is a recognized expert in criminal justice reform. He is a former Chief Assistant District Attorney with the Alameda County District Attorney's Office in Oakland, California. He's a highly skilled trial attorney with vast criminal law experience, having supervised at all levels of the district attorney's office, including the felony trial team, the juvenile division, the branch courthouse operations, and he was director of recruitment and development and director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. So he has a reputation for standing steadfast for justice regardless of the person committing the crime, as he showed in the case against 3 Oakland police officers who called themselves the Writers. Mr. Wiley prosecuted the 3 rogue police officers after numerous individuals fell prey to their corruption and illegal activities. Mr. Wiley has been featured on several crime shows on the ID channel and Discovery Channel, featuring several of his interesting and complicated murder cases. Mr. Wiley has supervised at all levels of the district attorney's office, including the felony trial team. I think I said that already. Okay, it's a repeat. I'm not going to repeat that.
That's enough.
Okay, so then we have Professor Frank Rudy Cooper, who is actually is a professor here in Las Vegas. So he is William S. Boyd Professor of Law and Director of the Race, Gender, and Policing program. He graduated from Amherst College and Duke University Law School, where he was the Duke Journal of Gender, Law, and Policy and the Moot Court Board, and served as research assistant to Professor Jerome McChrystal Culp. He clerked for the Honorable Solomon Oliver Jr. and practiced in Boston. He's a highly rated teacher of criminal procedure, investigation, civil rights, criminal law, identities, culture, and law. He was awarded 3 Derek Bolk Skoll and Laurel Thatcher Ulrich at Harvard University. He also taught at Boston University Law School, Villanova University School of Law, Boston College Law School, and Suffolk University Law School. He has studied pedagogy extensively through Course Design Institutes. Professor Cooper is also a productive scholar known for work in criminal procedure, masculine studies, and critical race theory, including co-editing the book Masculinities and the Law, a multi-dimensional approach. His dozens of other publications have appeared in Inter Ally, the Boston University Law Review, the University of California Davis Law Review, the University of Illinois Law Review, the Arizona State Law Journal, and the California Law Review. Professor Cooper won the AALS Minority Sections 2024 Clyde Ferguson Award. His service to his law schools has included chairing teaching, tenure, and scholarship committees. He has been a leader nationally, as well as having co-founded the SALT LAT Crit Junior Faculty Development Workshop and the John Mercer Langston Writing Workshop. So Professor Cooper, raise your hand, Professor Cooper, so we can know who you are. And then we have, next to Professor Cooper is Attorney Herbert Adams, Deputy Chief Assistant District Attorney in Gwinnett County, Georgia. He's a Deputy Assistant District Attorney in Gwinnett County, Georgia. However, he spent most of his career as a criminal defense and personal injury lawyer. He's tried over 100 cases to verdict and litigated many appeals. Attorney Adams has been a traffic court judge and a part-time instructor at Clayton State University, teaching courses in criminal law, history, and political science. And then I'm going to turn it over to Attorney Taylor Coleman to introduce the rest of the panelists. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Robyn, and thank you, panel. I'm Delicia Taylor Coleman, and I am currently the current president of the Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan. I've been practicing 28 years, primarily criminal defense, over 100 cases to trial, doing family, juvenile justice, and various other aspects. And we just welcome you for partaking in this exceptional CLE. So we look forward to our panelists and the information that they can provide in one thing. So our first, the first I'm going to introduce is Attorney Stephen Keenan. Thank you. We have next past Arizona State Bar President Ben Taylor, and Attorney Benjamin Taylor's dynamic legal practice focuses on personal injury, family law, and criminal defense, including death penalty cases. His views on legal matters have been sought by national media, including The Today Show, NBC, Fox News, CBS, Dr. Phil, O'Reilly Factor, CNN, HLN, MSNBC, ABC, NPR, The New York Times, and LA Times. He is a frequent guest analyst on Phoenix area TV news and talk radio. He has represented celebrities, athletes, and other newsworthy clients. An Arizona native, Attorney Taylor earned his Juris Doctorate from the University of Arizona, James E. Rogers College of Law, and a Bachelor of Science in Finance from Arizona State University. I wish I had my glasses on. He has worked for the Pima County Attorney's Office, the Maricopa County Public Defender's Office, and the Arizona State Legislature. Attorney Taylor was a statewide officer for the State Bar of Arizona Criminal Justice Section, Executive Council, and was selected for the State Bar Leadership Institute. He's actively involved in the Maricopa County Bar Association, and he volunteers with the Maricopa County branch of NAACP Legal Redress Committee and mentors through the various organizations. We thank Attorney past Arizona State Bar President Ben Taylor.
Thank you.
And last but certainly not least, Professor Peter Johnson. Thank you. Professor and Attorney Peter Johnson has a JD MBA and is a federal criminal trial attorney. He's a professor and advocate and is a lecturer of law at the University of California, UCLA School of Law, and the University of Southern California, USC, Gould School of Law. Attorney Johnson, say Attorney Johnson, graduated from the University of Maryland School of Law, Order of Barristers, where he was a member of the National Trial Team and the Jessup International Moot Court Team. After law school, Attorney Johnson served as a law clerk to the Honorable Robert M. Bell, Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals of Maryland, and law clerk to the Honorable Alexander Williams, United States District Judge. Attorney Johnson also earned his Master of Business Administration from the IE Business School in Madrid, Spain, where he lived and taught graduate and undergraduate courses in Principles of Finance, International Corporate Finance, Business Economics, Operation Management, and European Business Law. Prior to opening his own law firm in Southern California, he had served as an assistant federal public defender in Baltimore, Maryland, and a deputy federal public defender in Los Angeles, California. He's also worked as a litigation associate in the mid-sized law firm in Washington, D.C., with more than 20 years of experience in public service and private practice. Attorney Johnson has successfully litigated hundreds of federal criminal cases, including jury trials, bench trials, evidentiary hearings, and appeals. Thank you all, panelists.
Thank you, Delicia. So at this time, we're going to get started with talking about the basic question of what is police accountability? And we're going to start with Terry. Do you have the microphone? Terry, Attorney Terry Wiley, can you explain to the audience what is police accountability?
Okay, thank you, Robyn. So what is police accountability? Well, let me first back up just a little bit. As it was told to you, I'm a former 33-year prosecutor that prosecuted primarily in the city of Oakland, and I jokingly like to tell people that when the Crips and Bloods were wreaking havoc on Los Angeles, the one city in California they knew to stay out of was Oakland, because it's a very, very rough city to manage. But when you have a city like that, it will sometimes give law enforcement the feeling that they have freedom to police the city in any way they can, any way they want to. And so what is police accountability? Police accountability is really ensuring that citizens are being constitutionally policed, so that everything a police officer does in their contact with the community needs to be done in a constitutional manner. And so as a result of a lot of the heinous cases we've heard about over the years, and particularly with the advent of video, and we've actually seen some of this play out, there's been a huge focus on police accountability. But what you learn when you are in the system, that what really police accountability is really about is access. And what do I mean by access? It is providing access to citizens to file complaints. Because you cannot find out about a lot of the misconduct unless people have access to making those complaints. And so police accountability is having access. And then the last thing I will tell you, it is the importance of having data and data collection. And what you find is that in many police agencies around the country there's very poor data collection. And so a lot of what is the movement that is going on within our criminal justice system today is increasing accessibility for citizens filing complaints, and also increasing the amount of data collection, because you really can't tell exactly what's going on systemically unless you have the data.
Okay, thank you, Terry. And then we'll hear from Frank and Herb on this issue about, again, the question is, what is police accountability?
Okay, so I think that's an excellent statement of what police accountability could entail. I'll just make a few points. We don't have it, right? We would have it if people got the policing that they wanted. And specifically, if minority communities got the policing that they wanted. And it's complicated because sometimes the policing that we want is indeed going in and enforcing laws. But usually it's not the type of policing that we get, which is programmatic stop and frisk, right? Just stopping every young person who looks like they might have a gun on them for no good reason. It is not when we have a lack of democratic accountability where we have the data and then we can challenge both the department and individual officers. So I'll sum up by saying that police accountability would mean that the bosses of the police, the democratically elected folks who are supposed to be overseeing the police, listen to the communities that are most policed.
Let me begin my comments by saying I'm speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for Gwinnett County or the district attorney's office. The question is, what is police accountability? And I think we should begin with a definition. I define police accountability as holding police to account for their misdeeds. Holding the police accountable. And the big cases, the high profile cases we hear about, and those are a little bit easier to digest and to deal with. It's the other cases that don't make the news, that are not in the press, that are also important. And that's where I think prosecutors perhaps have a unique ability to make sure that the right thing is done. And some of those closed door sessions, and those things do happen. But it is important to hold the police accountable, to hold them to account for misdeeds. And as a prosecutor, I took an oath to not do anything out of fear or favor. And that comes to the police, that comes to anybody. And that's what I try to do every day.
Thank you. And also, we have placed index cards at the end of the tables. If you have questions for the panelists, we'd appreciate if you wrote them down so that we could collect them and then ask the panelists any questions that you might have. Next question is, what does effective police accountability look like in the nation? And we would ask Ben, Stephen, and Peter to answer that.
Oh, no, in the state, that's number 2. So it's in your state. So
In your state.
Okay, thank you. You know, I'm a trial lawyer, I'm a litigator, so I'm in court a lot of times throughout the day, throughout the week. I believe police accountability, you have to file lawsuits in order to hold them accountable. You have to sue them. The second thing that I do oftentimes is I use the media. Police officers don't like bad publicity, and I often say that the media is the fourth branch of the government because they don't like the heat. They don't like to look as if they're not covering every aspect of an investigation before they go out there in the media and announce what's going on. And how they do it, they go and talk to family members. They want to control the narrative. So what I do is I jump out there right away. I do have a sample press release, even if we were unable to show it, but essentially we say, you know, the family and community organizers are going to hold a march in commemoration and in rally. So we just give the who, what, when, the time, and what happened. So in this particular case, it says, David Sullivan, an unarmed 19-year-old, was tragically murdered by the Boynton Park Police Department. We give the officer's name. They unjustifiably shot and killed David Sullivan. So this isn't the one. But you can leave that one up there if you like. They unjustifiably shot and killed David Sullivan by shooting him a total of 7 times in broad daylight. The family of David Sullivan will hold a march and commemoration rally on April 17, 2021. So this is, it's a white kid, he's bipolar, you know, he decides to take a car on a joyride. So he goes on a joyride, cops pulled him over for expired tag.
Stephen, is that the one that's up there now?
No, but you can leave that one down. Yeah, okay, that's fine as well. But it's just a who, what, it's one page. You know, after a while, you sort of have a media following, your media book, and you hit them up. You know, I've been in court sometimes 1 hour, and later on that afternoon, you know, my case is on the news or it's in the LA Times, etc. So we're putting pressure on them to have some sort of accountability. But essentially, this kid, they pull him over because expired tags. So they do the expired tags, they go back to the car, then they find out the car stolen. So then they do a felony stop. So we talked a lot about their tactics And the procedures, I mean, they should have already known it was a stolen car, et cetera. He freaked out, he's bipolar, he ran out the car, no gun, no nothing in his hand, just running around frantically. They shot him 17 times. So we filed the case, and one thing in my particular state, there's a 6-month government claim. So within 6 months, you have to file the government claim. It typically gets rejected, and then you have 6 months in order to file your lawsuit. Now that's if you want to file in state court. Federal court is just 2 years. But it's very important you jump on it right away, because if you file the state court causes of action, they can get removed to federal court. In this particular case, we filed the state law cause of action, they removed it to federal court, we had the trial in federal court, one juror decided not to rule in our favor, so it was hung. So this time we said, let's go to state court. Was that form shopping? Well, so what? State court, you only need 9 out of 12. It was in Orange County, but we won the state court case about a month ago. Jurors gave me maybe like $3 million or whatnot. But the bottom line, in my particular state, we use the media as a tool. Have your book of contacts, let them know what's going on, and you gotta jump out there. If we look at the next slide, you wanna control the narrative. So the next document I have is just, when I'm up there, I'm saying things like, this person was killed a few hundred feet away from where we're standing now. The Sheriff's Department has blocked the LA County Coroner's Office from disclosing the autopsy results. They blocked us with any access to names of witnesses, the description of the events, the names of the deputies. We demand justice, et cetera, et cetera. So we're putting pressure on them. We're trying to control the narrative because they want to get this into the minds of the prospective jurors. The jurors go, oh, I heard something about that case, but they've already formed their opinions. Now you got these jurors sitting there, and they've heard this narrative, but they haven't heard the true story. So you gotta jump out there ahead, use the media, file your lawsuit, get your discovery. Another thing I do oftentimes is I will file my state claim, file in federal court. Federal court, you get a lot more discovery, a lot more disclosures. They gotta say, here's everything we got. So I file a lawsuit, I get in federal court, here's everything we got. I dismiss in federal court, go back down to state court. Now guess what, I'm ahead. Because they're gonna get different lawyers, file the lawsuit, and start taking depositions right off the bat. Now I kind of know more than they know, in a way, as far as strategically for trial. So those are some of the things that we do in California, and we let them know, a loss of a son, every day they mourn the loss. His dad goes to the railroad tracks saying a prayer. He's not here for Christmas. So you gotta humanize. This is a boy, this is somebody's son. Christmas is gonna be different. Every day his father drives past this area now, there's a loss. So you try to get to the human condition, the human emotion. So it's like, dang, what if that happened to one of my kids? And they holding back, and they not answering any questions. Was it a cover-up? So you gotta control the narrative, because we're already behind enough in these type of cases, so you just gotta jump on it.
Okay, next we'll hear from Ben Taylor, he was actually the first Black Arizona State Bar president. So let's give him a round of applause, okay? He is the first. So again, the question for the audience is, what does effective police accountability look like in your state?
No, thank you, Robyn. And Robyn actually had a chance to come out to Arizona for our state bar convention this past last month. So thank you, Robyn, for sort of support for that. But I'm out of Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I mainly practice. I do a lot of the same things that Stephen does, using the media to help you with your cases. But as we all know, it's hard to prosecute a police officer. We all know that with the politics of the police unions, a lot of times the police officers don't get disciplined. But what we have done, right, recently, we've had a Department of Justice investigation into our City of Phoenix Police Department. And what we did was a lot of activists, a lot of attorneys, contacted the Department of Justice to be able to do that investigation. Because back during 2020, during George Floyd's murder, we had a lot of protests and marches, and the City of Phoenix Police Department were arresting people for just doing their First Amendment rights of walking down the street, basically. The Department of Justice actually found findings. So we, I don't know if you've seen Attorney and Assistant Attorney General Christian Clark. She's been here at this conference speaking, but she did a press conference of all the findings that were found against the City of Phoenix Police Department. And that's one way to get accountability. I always encourage people to get a group together to try to get the Department of Justice involved, because that's the federal agency that come in to try to hopefully clean up the City of Phoenix Police Department. But one thing they found was they were racially discriminating against black and brown people. They found excessive force. And one thing that was rare that had never been found across the United States was the City of Phoenix Police Department was harassing the homeless. One of our least vulnerable populations. So right now, are people familiar with how the Department of Justice works and their consent decrees, what they ask for? People kind of familiar with that, but if you're not, basically they come into your city to try to clean up your police department and they ask for a consent decree. Pretty much it's a court order saying, police department, you have to do X, Y, and Z. Your city can say, yes, we're going to do it, or fight back. So right now, the City of Phoenix Police Department is fighting back, and the City Council is fighting back because they don't want to do some of the things that the Department of Justice has gone. So, not to plug elections, but elections are important, right? So if you want to see a police accountability in November, I'm sure there's one candidate who probably could care less about police accountability. I'm sure there's another candidate who will keep going, and you have Attorney General Kristen Clark, who could hopefully, if your city is facing these troubles in your police department, to come in and hopefully clean up the culture of the police department. But that's one thing that we did as attorneys, as activists, got a bunch of letters, contacted the Attorney General's office, and now we do have that investigation. So hopefully the culture of the City of Phoenix Police Department does change. Of course, you can sue, something like Stephen does and myself, but I would also encourage the Department of Justice to come in if you can.
I'm Pete Johnson. I'm from the Los Angeles area, so I'll focus that California's a very large state. I'll focus kind of on that area. California might be, as Terry was saying earlier, they are probably more progressive in terms of police accountability, but a lot needs to happen. In Los Angeles, there's a department DOJ investigation going on in the city of Los Angeles, as well as the state is focusing on the sheriff's department there. There's been a backlash by the sheriff's department. I think what's interesting about the sheriff's department in Los Angeles is that training begins in the jail for the first 2 years. Having practiced criminal law for quite some time in Los Angeles, you recognize that when an officer is trained in the jail and then goes into the street and tries to bring that same mentality, it's a big problem. I have the unique perspective of having represented deputies for a while there in Los Angeles. So I can tell you that there is a problem that needs to be corrected in Los Angeles. But the main things that I look at is in terms of advice that I would give, I don't do the civil work, but I admire the work because it's important to speak out. But from the perspective of federal criminal defense, what I ask lawyers to do is the same thing you see in an airport. You see something, you say something. We have to speak up. What we do is we try to file these motions to make sure we highlight the officers that are problematic. When I was with the Federal Public Defender's Office, it was great to have these data banks, as Terry talked about, where we were able to communicate. But often, as lawyers, I'm not sure how large our firms are in criminal defense, we operate in silos. We operate just alone sometimes, and we may try to ignore those issues or set them aside. But they're big issues. We should file those motions. The second thing, we see something, we say something, we have to communicate with our colleagues that are pursuing these civil cases and make sure that we are sharing that information amongst each other. So I would say those two things are very important.
Okay, next we'll hear from Terry, who has a PowerPoint to talk about. Again, this question is, what does effective police accountability look like in your state?
So, as it was just stated by my esteemed colleague, California, there's a huge movement towards police accountability. And it comes in many different forms. You heard that I tried a case called the Riders. Well, this was a case where a group of officers would go out on a nightly basis and they would plant drugs on suspects. They would arrest the suspects, and if the suspects complained about their treatment, they would take them under a dark overpass, pull them out the car, and beat them. They would then take them to jail, and the jails would not accept them because they were so injured, and they'd have to take them to the hospital instead. So as a result, there was all of this systemic corruption that was going on in this particular case, and Ben is probably dealing with that now with the Phoenix Police Department, and that the DOJ is probably finding a lot of systemic conduct that is not amounting to constitutional policing. And so in Oakland, Oakland accepted federal oversight, and the Oakland Police Department has been under federal oversight for about 20 years now. And as a result of that case, when I left the district attorney's office, I literally was sitting on my couch watching a rerun of Bonanza, and my phone rings, and it's San Francisco, and they're like, Terry, we have this new office of the Inspector General that we want to create, and we'd like you to come and talk to us about it. So I went through the process, and so I was given the unique opportunity to create an office of the Inspector General responsible for the oversight of the Sheriff's Department. So to just look at some of the investigations that was going on in the San Francisco Sheriff's Department that was the result of the creation of this office, there were, well, this slide talks about the office that I'm creating. So the office, our responsibilities are investigations. So we handle all complaints of San Francisco Sheriff employees and contractors. So we don't handle just the complaints of the deputies. We also handle the complaints of the civilian employees and any third-party contractors that contract with the Sheriff's Department. We also, any death in custody is investigated by the Inspector General. And let me just say, police agencies do not do a good job of policing themselves, which is why you will have these big systemic cases where their internal affairs units are supposed to be conducting these investigations, and they just don't do a very good job. So in the case of San Francisco, they wanted independent investigations of the Sheriff's Department. So our policy is to develop a review process for use of force and critical incidents. So not only do we conduct the investigations, but we also help the sheriff implement their use of force policies. We also handle looking at reporting and auditing. So we look at, is this police agency collecting the kind of data so that we can look at that data and determine whether or not there is any kind of systemic problems going on within that department. And then finally, we conduct hearings. So I have subpoena power. So if there is something going on in San Francisco, I can go to any agency in San Francisco and subpoena those records from that agency. Next slide. So the mission, so you have to have a mission, vision, and value statement when you're creating these agencies. Of course, workspace and technology. You have to have administrative functions, community engagement, which is very, very important. Next slide. Funding. This is a big deal because San Francisco has a $15 billion budget. We have about an $800 million budget deficit. And so when you have an $800 million budget deficit and you have a new agency starting at the same time, it's a battle to get proper funding to really get the agency off the ground. Next slide. So I'm going to step around so I can see. So we have two agencies in San Francisco that handle oversight of the police agencies. There's the Department of Police Accountability. They handle oversight of the Sheriff's Department. And we now, of the Police Department. And we now have the Office of the Inspector General, and we handle the oversight of the Sheriff's Department. And the Sheriff's Department is responsible for basically running the jail and policing those unincorporated areas around the city of San Francisco. Now here's the difference between the two agencies. So the San Francisco Police Department has about 1,500 police officers. There's been a lot of problems over the years with the San Francisco Police Department. So they created a civilian oversight of the police department. And the oversight of the police reports to a police commission. These are civilians appointed by the mayor and by members of the board of supervisors to do the oversight of the police department. They investigate, file charges, and recommend discipline. So if you're a San Francisco police officer and you come before the commission for discipline, they can recommend any level of discipline, including termination. So the commission is a powerful commission. The chief of police adjudicates minor discipline. So if it's a minor case, it really doesn't go before the commission. They only adjudicate the major incidents that occur. The commission adjudicates the more severe discipline, and they do mandatory performance audits. So they have individuals that are every day looking at data out of the San Francisco Police Department to determine, are they seeing any trends that is resulting in any kind of systemic misconduct taking place with the police department. Now here's the difference with my agency. So my agency is oversight of the sheriff, but we report to a sheriff's oversight board. So my bosses are 7 members of this oversight board. We investigate, but we can only recommend discipline. So the Department of Police Accountability, they can implement discipline. They can actually fire a police officer. We can only recommend it. And the sheriff, the elected sheriff, can either follow my recommendation or not follow my recommendation. The board does not adjudicate discipline, and the audits are discretionary. So it's at my discretion if I want to conduct an audit. But what you have as a result is you have independent oversight of these police agencies. And it makes a huge difference, and I'll just give you one example and then I'll sit down. As soon as my agency came online, we looked at the number of reported incidents of misconduct by the Sheriff's Department. It dropped 50% as soon as I came on board. As soon as those deputy sheriffs found out that there was an independent inspector general that was now going to be handling any complaints that would normally go to their own internal affairs, we saw the complaints drop 50%. So oversight is very, very important, and independent oversight can make a big difference in the way police departments operate.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Now we'll open it up for all of the panelists to address the question of what does effective police accountability look like in the nation? Sure. And remember, we have cards that are going to go around so you can ask questions.
Okay, so we'll just go down the line on national police accountability. I'll just echo what was said before. Police accountability is on the ballot. We may not get the candidates that we would like, but we know what will happen if candidates that are directly opposed to us are elected, and that's a choice that we make, right? To sit on our hands is to defeat police accountability. A second thing that I'll say is when Terry was talking about, when they investigate themselves, they don't do such a good job. That's because of the blue wall of silence, right? It is on purpose that they don't do a good job. That is their goal, not to do a good job. So we do need things like increased accountability for offices that they will actually respect and hopefully fear, so that they will do what we're asking for. So what are we asking for at the national level? I think at the national level, we're asking for them to follow the Constitution, but more than that. Most of these consent decrees ask for things beyond what this corrupt, redemptionist Supreme Court would say is the minimum required by the Constitution. They say things like you shouldn't be allowed to make pretextual stops where you say, oh, you crossed the median line when you made a turn back there a couple blocks ago, so now I'm gonna do a concealed interrogation of you for being a drug dealer, and then I'm gonna search your car to see if you're a drug dealer. Those pretextual stops can actually be dealt with in consent decrees or even something short of a consent decree. In Las Vegas here with Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, they were famous for being quick triggers. Well, that has changed a great deal, not even through a direct consent decree, but through the threat of a consent decree leading to agreements to change policies so that the police were trained in de-escalation policies so that they had an idea of what they could do short of pulling out their gun and shooting someone. And the reason that I mention nationally but then talk about Las Vegas is because there are 1,800 policing agencies across the nation. And so there's not really a national solution. It is true that the threat of a consent decree is extremely powerful and important. But that is just the message that gets sent at the federal level about what are best practices. So some of this will also involve trying to create best practices. I'll just point you to one thing, which is the current presidential administration has created the National Law Enforcement Accountability Database. It is not perfect. It is anonymized and so forth, but it does give a sense of what's happening at the local level, and that's the kind of leadership that we need on police accountability.
You know, the age-old question, who's going to police the police? I mean, that's been around for ages. And I think the fact is, with most organizations, it's not unique to policemen, but most organizations don't do a good job of self-policing. And so in most instances, you're going to need an independent outside agency or person or group of people to hold people accountable. As the professor said, there are, almost 2,000 law enforcement agencies across the country. We cannot depend on Washington, D.C. to solve the national policing problem. As lawyers, we know policing is primarily a state function, not a federal function. And the way you hold police accountable at the local level is the same way you hold everyone else in office accountable, and that's by your vote. And, it's fine to focus on the presidential election every 4 years. That is important. But in most local communities, there's an election every 2 years. And those people will have more of a direct impact on you than anything out of Washington. And every single law in America was passed by a legislature of some kind. Every single law. Except for, I guess you could say, the Constitution, which was at the Constitutional Convention ratified by the states. But since then, every law has been passed either by a state legislature, a county commission, a city council, or Congress. And so we have to hold these people accountable and exercise our right to vote and forget about the polls. If we listen to the polls, there would have been a President Hillary Clinton. If we listen to the polls in 2022, there would have been a red wave. And if you are losing in the polls, polls have some accountability, but if you're losing in the polls, then as someone said, when you're knocked down, you get back up. I'm from Atlanta. A few years ago, our Atlanta Falcons were in the Super Bowl. We had a 20-something point lead in the second half. But did the New England Patriots say, no, we're gonna bench Tom Brady and give up? No, they regrouped and they pulled up, and we're still sore about that in Atlanta. So, the only poll that counts is on the election. And we have to show up and vote. And also on voting. To me, and I talked to some of my students, but I've just always felt that two of the most important things a citizen can do in America is to vote. And I think we focus so much on that. Another thing, though, that to me is right behind it, and in some instances, I guess as a lawyer, even more important when you have a lot of power, and that's to serve on these juries. You know, when you get that summons in the mail, most of us say, oh man, I don't want to go to jury duty, I don't want to go to jury service, I don't want to have time to... You're one of 12 people in a room that's going to decide the fate of someone in a criminal case, whether you're basically he lives or dies, goes to prison for 20 years or life, or in a civil case, whether they get compensation for police misconduct or other misconduct, and whether they're going to get nothing or perhaps millions. But it's serving on the jury. In one vote, if you can't convince everyone else on the jury, you can hang the jury and get a mistrial and make them start all over again, whether it's a civil case or a criminal case. When you get that summons in the mail, don't shuck your responsibility to do your jury duty, and encourage your family members, your friends, neighbors, whoever you see. Just like voting, when you get a chance to serve on a jury, serve. Thank you.
Everyone doesn't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
You can go to the next question.
I'll just add just the database. The ACLU also has a database that we can use on a national level. The database that was discussed by Professor Wood also, it's difficult because it's not shared by the public. It's only available to federal law enforcement. So there has to be some additional changes, but that's more on the national level.
And very quickly, on a local level, even in our cities, in the group of attorneys, we have our own listservs, right, in your city. And if you have bad officers that are acting badly, I'm sure if you have a criminal defense listserv or prosecution listserv, whatever listserv you're involved in, you can email out and say, hey, has anybody had a case with officer so-and-so? And hopefully somebody can, email back and, tell you, yeah, I had a deposition or some sort of officer interview. So that way you know what officers are acting badly in your city.
Thank you. We're going to jump around. And specifically, anyone that has specifics that might be of use, if a person believes they are a victim of police misconduct, what should they do? Where should they go? If you have some ideas. You spoke a little bit about the media, but...
I mean, just practically speaking, I always say get a lawyer. But you can, you can file a complaint. Obviously, you go down to the police station, file a complaint. Essentially, there will be an investigation, and even if nothing is done, at least there's a record of it. What happens is later on, if I have that same officer involved in another case, I can file what's called a pitches motion. Once I file a pitches motion, if it's granted, then they're going to provide me with the names and the addresses of individuals who have filed complaints against this officer. And it might be something simple as he used the N-word against me, he pushed me to the ground, etc. That particular case maybe didn't involve me to anything, but now I have that information. I can take a deposition of the officer and probe a little bit more into it, and I do that oftentimes. So definitely go ahead and file a citizen complaint. Maybe it leads to internal affairs investigation, maybe it doesn't. But it provides a basis for us when we're cross-examining these officers in order to have that information available. There's been times, just like my colleague has addressed that, with the Sheriff's Department in Los Angeles, they have their own little clique, they have their own little gangs. And I've been able to use information against a particular officer, complaints that went nowhere, but when I got him on the hot seat and I was cross-examining him in trial, there were certain things he tried to deny. And I had this information, and I walked up and I impeached him with it, and I impeached him with it, and I impeached him with it. And after 6 times, the judge saw who this guy really was and allowed me to bring in the fact that he was a gang member. And I had pictures of him throwing up gang signs with fellow officers in the Sheriff's Department. So that helped us out very well. And when they knew in that case, in federal court, I'm telling you, it's very tough, still hung. I had one jury that didn't vote for us. But we dismissed, we're going to state court the next time, and guess what? We had this information now, it wasn't subject to a protective order, that means they knew I was going where? Right to the media. And so they went and put the proper amount of money in order to bring the family justice. And that happens sometimes, the family is $3.5 million, it's a lot of money, you can do a lot of change in the community, she wanted more. I said, well, we all want more. I mean, it wasn't because she wanted more money, but that wasn't justice for the loss of her son. And he was a twin, so it was devastating. But go ahead and file your complaint, get a lawyer, because even though you can request public records, you can do Public Records Request Act in California allows you to get minimal amount of information on the officers, but not enough. Get a lawyer so we can jump in there and start changing the narrative. But file a complaint, because even if yours goes nowhere, it can be utilized, and it really helped this family, just based on the fact that he N-word, went into the prison stuff, and it was basically, he's part of a Mexican gang, beaten on. And as a matter of fact, as egregious of acts that they would do when they arrest somebody, if they shot them, if they killed them, whatever, they get extra points in their game. Cops, sheriff's department, you probably know it's all up in the news. So they would go and brag about it, and give them high fives and have fun. So it's a crazy world out there.
Anyone else?
Oh, yeah. This is, listening to Stephen, the one assumption is that he's talking about individuals who are out of custody. These are all, everything he said, you're talking about somebody who's out in the community that wants to file a complaint. Well, from the Inspector General perspective, we're not looking at just the people who are out of custody, we're looking at the people who are in custody. So what we did, because we know that access is what can create accountability, by giving folks access to the ability to file a complaint. So we created a system. In most jails in California, I don't know outside of California, but in most jails in California, including San Francisco, the inmates are now given tablets, little iPads. So we created a system, a case management system, that also included a portal. So we can now upload that portal onto the inmate's tablet, and they can make a complaint against a deputy right from their jail cell. Now, we haven't, the portal's ready to go, but we're not gonna implement it until they give my agency more money, because it will create more cases if they're able to make those complaints from their cells. And until you have the funding to get your agency up and off the ground, that can be problematic. But the way the system is going to be moving in the future, you're going to see a bigger digital imprint within the criminal justice system, whether they're in custody or out of custody. And the other thing that we're negotiating, because when inmates are in custody, they're reluctant to make complaints. So we are negotiating with the sheriff to put a kiosk out in the visiting room of the jail, so that when the family members and the inmates when they're released, there's a kiosk right there if they want to file a complaint. So those are some of the ways to file complaints.
Thank you. I actually have a case where a very small area, it's called Howell, Michigan. It's one of the most racist areas in Michigan. The police department, we believe, violated my client's constitutional rights and refuses to accept a complaint against themselves. So I did what I felt was right, but does anybody have any idea or suggestions if someone needs that kind of situation? Yeah.
Then what, you file the case?
They would not let us file a police complaint against the police.
Oh, I go to the media. I find out who the officers are and contact local attorneys in the area. I'm always calling, Carl Douglas, Dale Galipo, all these guys, because they have databases on these officers. And sometimes it's subject to a protective order, so they'll kind of go roundabout, but maybe they could give me a theory or a concept that I haven't already considered. Sometimes I use what's called a Monell claim, which is that they have unconstitutional policies or practices, or the way they're implementing these particular policies are wrong. Because they'll have rules, they don't follow it. Well, that's not our practice. Why are we taking a look, at what your policy says? So what I would do is I typically get creative. I look out to other lawyers and see if there's a way around it. in order for me to get in there, in order to kind of do some discovery.
I would also,
Okay, let me just say one more. For local things, it should be the city council and the county commission, I would think.
I would just add that, you know, typically with local district attorneys, they have a very close relationship with law enforcement. I'll get to you in just one second. They have a close relationship with law enforcement, but typically if you have an agency that is refusing to take a complaint, that can be an indication of a systemic problem going on. So if they're not taking your complaint, how many other complaints are they not taking? I would take it to the U.S. attorney.
That's right.
I wouldn't even mess around with the local district attorney who has this relationship with law enforcement. I'd go right to the U.S. attorney and say, hey, we may have a systemic problem going on here. And I will assure you that if that police department knows that that complaint has gone to the U.S. attorney, watch how quick they start taking those complaints. There's a question in the back.
Good afternoon. I know it's late, but good afternoon. Good afternoon. I'm Beverly McQuarrie Smith, and I'm past president of the National Bar Association. And I was in a panel earlier today in which they announced that the additional branch of government is the press. So it seems to me, that was the panel dealing with large settlements with Ben Crump et al. And they basically said, you go through all the channels that you have and then you take it to the press. So I would squeal. I would squeal very loudly if I were you, if they would not take your complaint. And I'd have a press conference, and I'd let everybody know that this office has not taken a complaint, and here's the cry of your citizen or your plaintiff. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, panelists. Next question. What efforts are being made to ensure that the police have cultural competency when they are engaging with African Americans and other people of color, if any? Is there anything you know about?
I don't want to dominate the conversation, but in San Francisco, the quickest way to cultural competency is hiring some African Americans. And what was very interesting about our sheriff's department is there was an incident, the media came and did an article on it, and the inmate that they interviewed, when they asked him, well, it was the problem with the deputy sheriffs, he said no, because most of the deputy sheriffs look just like me. And so that was a very unusual response, and that he had a complaint, but it wasn't about the specific deputies, because many of the deputies in San Francisco are either Filipino, African American, or Hispanic. So you have a very, very diverse sheriff's department. So that's one way of improving cultural competency. But I know that in most police agencies, let's face it, they're white police officers. So.
Did anybody else want to address that question?
That's been my experience also, that most of the officers are white in the police departments in our county, and I think that's the case in most places. But we do need more people of African American descent, just more cultural diversity in the forces, and for a lot of reasons, people don't want to join the force because they've heard all the stories. But sometimes one of the best ways to change that narrative is to get in and make changes, and that can take time, and it's not something that's easy to do. Something controversial in our city, in Atlanta, has been the building, or they're trying to build a new facility to do that. It's been called Cop City across the country, and most of the media coverage has been against Cop City. I have concerns about it myself, but if we want a more culturally diverse and culturally understanding police force, some of it we've got to teach. Most things are learned. And sometimes all people, whether you're black, white, or polka dot, have implicit biases. That's just being human. And so to get a hold of that, to deal with it head on, implicit bias and other things, we need to do more training of the police about de-escalation. So there are a lot of things that need to be done. Now, with the cop city, maybe the location isn't right, but we need something. We need a facility to help educate the law enforcement and to hold them accountable. So at least that's my, again, I'm not speaking for the county, I'm not speaking for my boss, I'm speaking for Herbert Adams Jr. It takes work, and there are no easy answers. There's no silver bullet or panacea, but I think education is important. Now, we know a lot of these cops know what they're doing. We know that. And then there are others who, because a lot of times, unfortunately, we've seen that, it's black on black. Black cops mistreating black citizens. So there is a mentality that needs to be addressed, and I think it has to be addressed head on.
Okay, and I know we are coming close on time, so I'm going to combine the next couple of questions. What is qualified immunity, and what do you think it will take to get rid of qualified immunity on a local, state, and national level? And we'll start with Terry, Steve, and Frank, and then anyone else that wants to answer that question. And then in the course of answering the question, there's a question from the audience. It says, even if a civil judgment is obtained and substantial damages are awarded for wrongful death, innocent taxpayers foot the bill, not those responsible for the death. Can we create police accountability by requiring the officers to be financially responsible instead of taxpayers? Can police unions be required to pay insurance costs to protect innocent victims and their families? And again, just so everybody remembers, the question is, what is qualified immunity? And what do you think it will take to get rid of qualified immunity on a local, state, and national level?
Well, I'm going to actually let Stephen explain qualified immunity, but I'm just going to say this about qualified immunity. One of the reasons stores today let people come into the store, steal something, and they tell the security guard, don't do anything, is because they know that it can result in them being subject to litigation and settlements. And that's what's motivating a lot of that's going on. And so if they were not being subject to that litigation, they would tell the security to go, you can have at them. It's kind of the same thing with the cops. Until they are held personally responsible, they're going to continue to engage in certain conduct without any fear. And Stephen, I'm going to hand it over to you since you deal with qualified immunity.
Yeah, we put the slide up that you gave us on qualified immunity.
Thank you. Well, qualified immunity is just like it sounds, right? It's immunity to the officers under certain circumstances. We all go to law school and they tell you it's a stare decisis, right? So every case builds upon the next case because no two set of facts are identical. Well, it's the opposite when it comes to qualified immunity. Because you file a lawsuit and they say, well, how should the officer have known his conduct was wrong or it was illegal? Now, with the exception of shooting somebody in the back as they're running away with no objects in their hand, you're going to face qualified immunity on almost every single case you file. The interesting thing is the history of qualified immunity goes back all the way to 1871 in the wake of the Civil War. So we have the Civil Rights Act, we have the Ku Klux Act, Enforcement Act. So that was designed to provide blacks a vehicle in order to sue the government for violations of their rights. as a result of a response to the Reign of Terror. So this was in 1871. So it went on for about 100 years to 1967. Then they said, well, you know what? What if the officer acts in good faith or with probable cause? Let's give him immunity for that. So they carved out a little exception and said, well, if the officer subjectively believes that he's acting in good faith or with probable cause, we're going to go ahead and excuse him. Then it goes until 1982, and they said, well, maybe we should make this objective. If an objective, reasonable officer would have believed that he had reasonable grounds to use excessive force or whatever the violation may be. Now, it goes on and on and on to now we have a rule, and it's judicially created doctrine. The whole thing is if they go back to the legislative intent, they go to what Congress intended it to be, we wouldn't be where we are today. The judges created this whole phenomenon. And essentially, when it first started, it wasn't even a Section 1983 claim. It wasn't even a constitutional violation claim. It was an implied constitutional claim. And so it's almost like in the dicta, they picked up and said, oh, let's apply it to 1983 claims as well. And then it just snowballed from there. But if we look at the top, it says, the doctrine of qualified immunity protects governmental officials for liability for civil damages insofar as their conduct does not violate clearly established statutory or constitutional rights of which a reasonable person would have known. This paragraph states, an officer cannot be said to have violated a clearly established right unless the right's contours were sufficiently definite that a reasonable official in the defendant's shoes would have understood that he was violating it. While a case does not need to be squarely on point for a right to be clearly established, existing precedent must have placed the statutory or constitutional question beyond debate. So you say, what's a clearly established constitutional right? I've had cases where they said that a guy's out there with a gun, and he's with the gun, he's actually out there, there's a water hose, he picks up the water hose, before he can press the spray, cop said, turn around. He turns around, cop shoot him. The judge says, Mr. King, can you show me a case where there's a call of a man with a gun, and then he picks up a water hose, and he's about to spray, and the cop should have known that it wasn't a gun? I said, Judge, I don't think I could do that. Qualified immunity granted. I found a case, and in this case, when I went to look through my documents just to give you guys something, this is just a case, one law enforcement agency see a guy in a stalled vehicle, they're asking him to get out, he won't get out, they get another agency to come and help him. They throw smoke bombs and all this stuff, try to get the guy in the car, eventually gets out the car, unarmed, they shoot and they kill him. So, I filed the case, unlawful reasonable seizure, excessive force, denial of medical care, etc. So we go through, and qualified immunity, it's your job as the plaintiff to show that there was a clearly established constitutional right that was violated. And it's up to the judge to decide that. So, they failed to provide medical care. So essentially, and this is such a weird case. We argue that when they relinquished control to another Anaheim department and they told the other department that he had a gun, that was a violation of his constitutional right. He never had a gun. The judge granted qualified immunity and dismissed our case. We said that the other officer should have intervened, and we're just filing the lawsuit. We don't have all the information yet. The judge granted qualified immunity, dismissed our case on that. The dad got there, and the dad wanted to go and try to help talk the son out. They didn't allow the dad to help talk the son out. We filed a lawsuit on that basis. They granted qualified immunity on that. Dismissed our case as soon as it started. So qualified immunity, I think, is a way for the judges to sort of come to the officer's rescue, and they don't want to open the floodgate and have too many cases being litigated, show that the officers are just, it's just on a whim that they're doing these things. These are two unarmed cases where the judge granted qualified immunity. Now what happens is I got to appeal the case. That's going to take another 2 years. So why we move fast is I file the state law claims. Qualified immunity only applies to your federal claims. So while that appeal is going for 2 years, I'm taking my butt back in state court, and I'm going to go work on this case while I'm waiting on this appeal. So the law is that, they are protected. They're entitled to immunity, qualified immunity if they violated a federal or constitutional right. The unlawfulness of their conduct was clearly established at the time. So they're not entitled to qualified immunity if it's a federal constitutional right and it's clearly established. Once clearly established, it's up to the judge. So you're at the whim of the judge. Sometimes I file a case, depending on who the judge is, I dismiss it right away when I go to federal court. Or somebody calls me and says, hey, can you take this judge? Who's the judge? I can't help you. I got 5 years of my life like that.
The two-pronged step.
Yes.
Makes it so that we don't even get the clearly established law because they get to choose which
Yeah.
prong of the step to use first.
Right, you're going. I mean, this is a case, and we didn't get to develop the case, and it's gone. And there's no state law claim in this particular one, so it's hard. You want to help folks, but a lot of times you run in a circle until we can do something to change it. So I don't know how we gonna change it. I don't know who has ideas on that.
Congressman.
Oh, okay. Give him the mic.
One of the problems we have on the federal level is the debate appears we're going to have qualified immunity or not.
Right.
I think your discussion has shown where, of course, you're going to have qualified immunity. The question is just how was it applied?
Right.
And that is a different debate. And so when people say we get rid of qualified immunity, and that would mean if a police officer in good faith arrests the wrong person, that's kidnapping. But no, he has qualified immunity because he's doing his job. Now, when the doing your job part is qualified immunity. Shooting unarmed black people should not be part of your job for which you get qualified immunity. But we have to define the parameters of when qualified immunity kicks in, rather than to suggest, and you've done it. But that is not, we're going to get rid of qualified immunity, which the other side can just rip apart and we don't have a credible case. But I mean, this analysis where you show that the application of qualified immunity is unreasonable is where the debate is. It clearly defined prior cases. In some circuits you may not have a case like that, but it is clearly any reasonable person would know you shouldn't have done it. But if there's no case on point, you end up with qualified immunity. That's where we ought to be talking, and maybe name specific cases that we're overruling by statute. But we're in a losing situation if we use the term "get rid of qualified immunity."
I think one of the main issues, kind of like Stephen's case and the cases that we do, is not even allowing the jury to decide this. You have some judge who's appointed by a president who's able to throw out this case where there's direct violations, we can agree with. So why not let it go to the jury? So I understand what you're saying, Congressman, but I think a lot of people want it at least. Let's have a fighting chance and let.
Well, then define that, but don't describe that as quote getting rid of qualified immunity.
We need to get rid of qualified immunity because when you have, in your scenario that you spelled out, and I practice area law every day. I'm before the Fifth Circuit, but to your point, you made a good point, but the reason why I'm saying you don't need qualified, we don't need it as a society is because in your scenario where officers doing their job, there's a mechanism called a 12B6 motion where you can get the case dismissed automatically that way, and you don't need qualified immunity if you have a defense, a valid defense.
Because they're doing their job because they have qualified immunity.
No.
Can I intervene for a second? I agree with you completely. Congressman, with all due respect, I understand there's a political reality, right? Politics is the art of the possible, and it sounds like you're saying it's not possible to say get rid of qualified immunity. But I think the point that's being made that's really important is that the way the qualified immunity works is, first of all, they don't even ask, was there a constitutional violation? So you can never make the case that this was a constitutional violation. Then when you come to court the next day, they say, oh, where's your case, counselor? And you don't have a case because they said before, well, even if this was a constitutional violation, it's qualified immunity. So that's the first problem. But the second problem, and the problem that you're pointing to, well, what if an officer is just like, trying to arrest somebody, and that's their job to arrest somebody? Well, that can be dealt with either through a 12B6 motion to dismiss without using qualified immunity under summary judgment, because you can just say, were they acting under color of law is really what that question is, right? Like, were they acting as a police officer? Yes, they were. If they were kidnapping somebody because they were trying to arrest them.
If they were working under color of law, then they have qualified immunity.
They do now because they made that shit up right after the Civil War when they were trying to have redemption politics.
All government officials have qualified immunity.
Well, but they have immunity unless there's gross negligence. What prompted me to actually...
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, what prompted me to ask that question and frame it that way is I was talking to it's a colleague of mine that is a police officer, and he actually was involved with a case where he testified against another officer who committed police misconduct. And he says, look, I'm on the force, and he says, I have police officers all the time that commit misconduct, and they say, we don't care because we're covered. We don't have to pay it ourselves. And the officer said to me, look, if you make them personally responsible, then it will stop. Because I talk with lawyers, I've done panels with police officers. I anticipate we'll do some more panels with police officers and lawyers and have an interplay on these issues. But so what was said to me from this is actually, it was a police officer. He's like, if you make the officers personally responsible, then they will stop committing the
And Congressman, it's been done in Colorado. Responsible for, in Colorado, up to $25,000 if they commit a high degree of mens rea with which they committed the offense.
Like civilly liable, meaning...
And anything under that, they have qualified immunity.
But they don't have to. That's all we're saying,
You
Congressman.
don't have to.
They don't have to. That's a rule that the judiciary made up that was not in the statute.
Okay, well,
So we shouldn't assume that there has to be qualified immunity.
for acts under the threshold.
No, period. We don't have to
Doing
assume
your
that
job,
there's...
if you're doing your job,
If you're doing your job and you don't violate somebody's constitutional rights, which is really hard to do under this current court,
and that's if you're doing your job, you have qualified immunity.
not necessarily.
If I can
If
just,
you're doing your job in good faith the best you can, all government officials have qualified immunity. And in the debate, suggesting that they're liable for anything and everything, whether it's good faith,
It's
doing
not-
your job, or everything, is you can't make that case.
that's not how it works. Qualified immunity, this is how qualified immunity works. It's when it's said and it's clear that an officer has violated somebody's constitutional rights. It's clear. It's no doubt. We know this, right? So then once we know this, the courts say, I don't care if they've violated somebody's constitutional rights, give them qualified immunity.
Okay, that's his misinterpretation. Then we need to redefine when qualified immunity applies.
Yes, but it's that simple. They say, you have guessed, this person's rights have been violated. In Texas, we had a case where an officer set a man on fire.
I agree with you 100%, but you cannot, if they haven't violated their constitutional rights, negligence or what.
Okay, I see we have two more other questions from the audience. We'll take the questions, and then I see we're pressed for time, so.
Second question was not addressed.
Oh, the question that you asked, okay. So actually I'll just have everybody, if the gentleman, when the blue, if you can ask your question, and then Jonathan, and then we'll get to the question that I had raised, that you raised rather.
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. All right, perfect. We're still awake. Abdul Hafiz, practicing in New York, doing data privacy and cybersecurity, but have a keen interest in qualified immunity. And I think part of the question was, what can we do to end qualified immunity? And I just wanted to point out that there is a bill and is constantly introduced in Congress to end qualified immunity. It's H.R. 233. So if you do have an interest in something that you are passionate about, contact your legislature, your congressman, ask them to support this bill, so hopefully we can get some change, because there is no way that a judge can find a that the law has been violated because we can't get past the 12b-6. As soon as they ask the plaintiff, is there a clearly established law? There's no, so we can't even get to a point to establish it. So that is one of the main reasons why we need to let it go. So Congressman, you're here, H.R. 233, sponsored by Representative Banks of Indiana. Feel free, I think he's a Republican, and let's have that conversation.
Okay, and then Jonathan, I saw you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that, you know, the only way to get around qualified immunity is to say, or is to prove that a police officer was acting wholly outside of the scope of his job as a police officer some way. And the only way to do that is to say that the police officer's conduct was totally and wholly personal to him, to the police officer, and not within the scope of his job as a police officer. And that's impossible. That's like almost totally impossible.
An officer cannot be said to have violated a clearly established right unless the right contours were sufficiently definite that any reasonable officer in the defendant's shoes would have understand that he was violating it.
Unions be required to pay insurance costs to protect innocent victims and their families. So.
Yes, on both those. Colorado has a rule that does that. And then also a lot of scholars have talked about the possibility of insurance that, again, would be, you know, footed by the taxpayers in some ways, but might, insurance, when cities have to pay insurance for officers, sometimes those officers eventually move on, right? So we could do either of those things more thoroughly.
Okay, and I actually want to acknowledge my father, Attorney Robert McCoy, if you could stand and raise your hand. Attorney Robert McCoy, who is my partner in our firm in Ann Arbor. And then I see our chair is here, he's back. Did you have any closing remarks for us, Chair?
No, I just want to take the time to say thank you to each of these amazing panelists. I'm sure you had an amazing job, done a great job, a lot of information. As always, I'm sure this discussion can go on and on and on till the break of dawn, and I hate, but I'm going to let them. I do want to acknowledge before you go, Terry, that the Honorable, I'm sure you did it already, but I want to acknowledge the Honorable Bobby Scott that's here in
Yes, and I want to thank our esteemed panelists. This has been a great experience. We will, you know, again, when the children say to me that, okay, you got to talk about police accountability, you got to talk to the police, this is an issue that will stay with me, and we will continue to talk about this and have other panels and think of ways to address this issue. And I think Terry has something to say.
Oh, I just wanted to acknowledge my niece and her husband. They have a firm here in Las Vegas, and they showed up today. Stand up. Asia and Stephen and Gobway, and so I'm happy you guys are here.
Okay, and yeah, so again, thank you. I do have a website, Robyn Legal, so when I do educational programming, it's free, and you can go to Robyn Legal, check out my activities. It's Robyn with a Y. Again, thank you all for coming out. I know it's late, it's been a long day, and so I hope you all stay safe, and thank you to our president, Delicia Taylor Coleman of Black Women Lawyers Association of Michigan for helping to co-moderate this event. And again, our esteemed panelists. And don't forget to sign in for CLE. I know they said they took the code, but I always have people sign in as a backup.
And don't forget to join the criminal law juvenile justice section.
Yes.
We're waiting on you.
Only $25.
And Region 9 is having an